Hi, Corella again. And I'm back talking about verb forms because I couldn't get everything on the first uh, video that I did on verb forms, so I'm going to have to do a second video. And you know what? I'm going to have to separate the two languages now because it's not going to go. So I'm going to first talk about English and then I'm going to talk about it in Spanish, okay? So let's talk about the past tense form. Now, in English, when you're talking about the past tense form, you have to take in consideration if the verb is regular or irregular. Remember, I told you what an irregular verb is. An irregular verb doesn't follow the rule because, once again, if it follows the rule, there's no big deal. Okay, so if it follows the rule, like the verb to talk, you just get rid of the to, so now you have only the simple form of the verb. You have the verb talk, and then you add an ed, talked. Right? The vast majority of verbs in English, in any tense, are regular. That's why it's called regular, because it follows the rule. It follows the norm. It's part of the norm. But here's the thing. Some of, or maybe the majority of the most important, the most fundamental, the oldest verbs in English are irregular in the past tense. So therefore, the past tense form is also irregular. Now, I call it the past tense form rather than just the past tense because you don't use the past tense form only for the past in English. You can use it in other tenses, right? You might not be aware of it when you're doing it, but you're using it in other tenses, not just in the past tense. If the verb is irregular, and I'll give you a couple of those verbs. For example, if you're talking about the verb to eat, which is irregular in the past, you don't use the infinitive form. You don't use the you don't use the simple past form. It's an entirely different word. So you say, I eat every day, and yesterday I ate. Entirely different word. The verb to be, the most irregular verb in the English language, right? You don't use the infinitive form to be. You don't use the simple form be. It's an entirely different word. It's I was, you, we, they were, he, she, it was. Entirely different words. Same thing for the verb to go. These are irregular verbs now. Entirely different word. You don't use to go, which is the infinitive form. You don't use go, which is the simple form. Entirely different word. Went. But unlike the verb to be, it's only one form. So it's I, you, we, they, he, she, it went. Spanish is different. In Spanish, what you're using is the simple form of la raíz del verbo. So, for example, if you have the verb comer, which is the verb to eat in Spanish, right? It's regular, right? So you don't have to worry about its irregularities. There's many irregular verbs, don't worry, and I'll show it to you. So all you have to do is, there you use the simple form of the verb. Take off the ER, take off the IR, take off the AR, right? I'm going to use comer as an example because in Spanish, comer is regular. And then just add the endings, right? You don't have to use an entirely different form of the verb. Comí, comiste, comió, comimos, comieron, right? Hablé, hablé, hablaste, habló, hablamos, hablaron. Viví, viviste, vivió, vivimos, vivieron. Okay. So you don't have to worry about, the past form of the verb or anything like that. All you have to worry about, like most times, is the ending. And the ending, if it's regular, it's in AR, it has its endings. IR has its endings. IR yes, and ER has its endings. In a sense, just like in English, right? Because if you want to, you could say that the past form really is a simple form of the verb, talk, and adding an ED. But I call it the past form. That's just mine. Whichever floats your boat, whichever one you understand. But just remember, the past form of the verb is used for more than just expressing the past in English, because there's a lot of different pasts in English. And the form itself is used for different things. Okay. If the verb is irregular, no. And by the way, you have two pasts in Spanish, right? So you have hablé con mi mamá y hablaba, aba. And that's called the imperfect, imperfecto. Once again, it's a simple form of the verb, and then it's the ending for the AR verb, hablaba, hablabas, hablaba, hablábamos, which is not the easiest thing to say, hablábamos, hablaban. But if it's an ER or IR verb, I'm going to use the verb vivir como ejemplo, it's vivía, vivías, vivía, vivíamos, vivían. And that ia, ias, ian, iamos, ian is for AR and IR verbs. So you just use a simple form of the verb and then worry about those endings for regular verbs. If it's irregular, it's different. For example, you have the verb ser. In the past, what we would call what in English we call the simple past, which in Spanish is called a pretérito, it's fui. Look at that, entirely different. And each person has its own form. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. And if it's the imperfecto, right, of that same verb, entirely different word also. Era, eras, era, éramos, eran. There's memorization. So it's not the simple form of the verb. It's not this part of the verb. Entirely different words. Yeah. But if you want to learn another language, if you want to have the beauty of understanding how different people communicate, I think it's worth the time and the effort. One more form. The past participle. Now, if the verb is regular in English, the past participle form is the same as the past tense form. So talked and talked. So I talked to my mother yesterday. I have talked to you many times. That have is the auxiliary. Have talked. But if it's irregular, just like I ate, then the past participle form, a lot of times, is an entirely different word. I ate yesterday. I have eaten. In that, it's not that I have ate. Just like it's not I have went. I hear that a lot of times. I have went to the store. I have gone to the store. So if it's irregular, then a lot of times it's an entirely different word, right? But if it's regular, it's the same form as the simple past form. In Spanish, it's somewhat, once again, it's the ending. It's the form, it's a simple form of the verb, right? So if it's hablar, take off the ar, take off the AR, and then you add ado, A-D-O, right? If it's comer, right, then you add ido, comido. If it's vivir, then you add ido, vivido. One more point that I have to make, and then I'm going to have to, close out because this video is running a little bit long. In English, we say to make the present perfect, past perfect, future perfect, conditional perfect of a verb. It's the verb, it's the subject, right? Plus the verb to have, plus the past participle. Past participle of a verb is eaten, talked, spoken, played, I don't know, been. But the part that I want to make sure of is the verb to have. So it's to have in the present tense, to have in the past tense, to have in the future tense, or whatever. So I have eaten, I had eaten, I will have eaten, I would have eaten. That have, it is not the verb tener. It is not the verb tener. The verb tener in English means to have something in your hand, to possess. It's the verb haber. It's he comido, has comido, ha comido, hemos comido, han comido, habría comido, habré comido, right? It is not the verb tener, it's the verb haber. Okay, that's the verb forms in 2 videos. So until we see each other again, I already showed you the logo, so I don't have to show it to you again. You remember it. Okay, once again, Corella Fickler McLean, iStudyGuides.com. Thank you. Bye.